Hare Krishna, everyone. Good morning and a very happy Sunday to you all. My name is Gopikita Shomaker and I welcome you to the GBC SPT live event, the Children at Home Show. Today, without further ado, I would love to introduce you to His Grace Sesha Prabhu. He is the Minister of Education for the International Society for Krishna Consciousness and a disciple of Srila Prabhupada from like the 60s and early 70s. And I'm really lucky to be his, I guess you would say, volunteer employee. I serve as the vice principal of the TKG Academy, the first school established by Srila Prabhupada, and as regional secretary for the North American Ministry of Education. So thank you so much, Sesha Prabhu, for joining us today.
Thank you for inviting me.
We're really, really happy you're here. I'm really excited that you're here because I've been wanting to for so long hear from you about your education leadership service in ISKCON and what makes you so passionate about supporting all of us educators in the society for so many decades, really. And so perhaps we can start off with a little bit of an introduction from you. Like, how did you start this education service and what is your background in Krishna consciousness and in your life as far as education?
Well, thank you for inviting me again, and thank you for the question. I began my interest in ISKCON education from the very beginning of my interest in Krishna consciousness. I recall at one Sunday feast I attended at the old Brooklyn Temple in New York City. I met a rather tall gentleman there, dressed in white, and his name was Ganagamya, and he was happened to be visiting New York from Dallas, where he was part of the Gurukul there. And so I told him of my interest in my current employment, working with the Albany County Head Start program. And he said, "Oh, if you join, you can become a teacher at our school in Dallas."
Oh, wow, yes.
So education was there from the beginning. Of course, as a brahmachari, I didn't get a chance to be involved in education, but as things progressed and as my responsibilities in the society increased, I found myself on the GBC body, and at a time when the former Minister of Education, Jagadish Prabhu, was leaving his service, and so I requested to take up that service, and I became actively involved in the Ministry of Education, and with the first assignment of going to Vrindavan, to the Gurukul there. So I worked as sort of a long distance principal for the Vrindavan Gurukula from 96 to maybe 2002 or 2003, before others took over that service. So it's been a part of me and my service from the beginning of my involvement with ISKCON. And I feel very fortunate to have that opportunity because I sort of feel I have a proclivity for that. And anytime when you have a proclivity for a particular service and you can actually do that service, then I think you're in a fortunate position. So that's a bit about my background.
Yes. Oh, wow, Shesha Prabhu. I did not know that you were the principal of the Vrindavan Gurukul. And Head Start, you had started, you said, you had come to Krishna Consciousness and you were part of the Head Start program. And I think earlier you had mentioned that that was as a preschool teacher. And so that means that you've literally gone, run the gamut in a way, from preschool to then principal, preschool teacher to principal. You have a lot that shows that, Shesha Prabhu, it shows me as an educator and even me as a parent that you do have the experience, direct experience in working with children from a professional perspective. And that's really exciting. It's really inspiring. And I know that if there are issues that arise in taking care of children, working with children in ISKCON, we have a Minister of Education who's not just separated from the issues and the problems. He has personal experience in dealing with all of these. And so that's a very heartening thing to learn about you. And you also have a wonderful family. Mother Madhumati is like a second mother to us. were in Los Angeles, my sister and I, and she was our teacher in the Gurukul. And even more than that, she took us in. We'd go to her house and spend time with her. And she's your wife, and you have two daughters as well, Braja Baneshwari and Shamadarshini. Those are
Grandson now.
and a grandson too. That's right. Yes. So tell us what it was like to raise your two daughters in Krishna consciousness. What was that experience like?
Well, I think that a lot of credit has to go to the ISKCON Society and the Society of Devotees. There's that saying, it's probably a little overused, it takes a village to raise a child. But we were fortunate, as you mentioned, we were living in Los Angeles when both of our children were born. And the entire community being present there on Watsik Avenue provided a perfect atmosphere to raise our children, at least to a certain age when we stayed there. And so two daughters, raising children is obviously going to be a challenge in different ways, but having other devotees to associate with, to rely on their experiences, hear from them, it was a great help to us in raising our daughters. I think that there are several key points about what we experienced that I would like to share with your audience here today. And they are that example is so important. Actually, I went to my youngest daughter and my wife in preparation for this interview, and I asked her one thing about how you brought up your children or how you experienced growing up in this family. I put it to both of them.
Mm.
The one thing that you could point to that was significant. And they both said without hesitation that example of the parents and providing an example to the children was the most important factor.
Wow.
Children, they're like sponges. They absorb anything that's thrown at them. Often they catch more than we realize.
Yes.
But I think that providing a good example for your children is essential, is the most essential parenting message that I could give. They will thrive in with whatever atmosphere you put them, whether it's good or bad. And that naturally, I think putting the good is important there.
It's really powerful that you're saying that, Shesha Prabhu, because as my children are growing up now, I have, a 16-year-old and an 18-year-old, and we're kind of towards the end of the parenting journey. And there's always this worry: have I given my children enough? Have I led them correctly? Have I given them the foundation for the rest of their lives? When they hit 20 and 25, am I going to feel like, oh, I wish I did this and I wish I did that? And so hearing you say that, providing the example that if you are strict in your Krishna conscious principles, if you are focused in your service, your mission, if you're speaking sweetly, lovingly, and raising them the way you were raised, or just literally if you're practicing the principles of Krishna consciousness, whether or not the children are right now exactly practicing what you're practicing isn't necessarily the important thing. The important thing is that they will see that example, and then when they're on their own, they will strive to be like their parents. And I find that in my own life as well, that my mom and my dad were really strong examples. So I love that. It's interesting that your daughter said that that was the most important thing, and that's really heartening for me to hear as a mom, and also for me to hear as a teacher. And so many of you have joined us today. Please do feel free to ask questions. Here we are with Shesha Prabhu, the Minister of Education. Not only was he the principal of a school and a teacher, he's also a loving father, and he can answer a lot of your questions. during COVID, we're all finding that we're with our children so much more than usual. And there's always tension and this wondering of how do I get my kids to be Krishna conscious? You know, there's always this, I get so many questions thrown at me like that. Like, how do I get them, 3-year-olds and 10-year-olds and 7-year-olds? How do I make them Krishna conscious? And so I love you saying it's like, take a deep breath. It's not something you have to like stuff down their throats. Just be an example. It's such a powerful, powerful point you're making here.
Yeah, let me add to it a bit here, because I think that obviously we want our children to be Krishna conscious.
Yes.
And we can take the position of, cramming Krishna consciousness down their throat, or we can take the position of letting others do the preaching, if you will. We, as I mentioned, lived in the Los Angeles community, and since then we've lived in a couple of other communities, Potomac, Maryland, and now in Alachua, Florida. And we found that, and I say we, I mean my wife and I have found that taking the children to the temple on a regular basis, sitting for Bhagavatam class, even if it means sitting in the back coloring with them or learning numbers, which I recall doing in the upstairs balcony there in Los Angeles with my oldest daughter. Letting Krishna consciousness be given to them by others, by the community effort. That's why Los Angeles was such a good experience. There were others that gave Krishna consciousness. So it wasn't like their relationship, our children's relationship with us was just feeding them Krishna conscious all the time, and sort of a philosophical relationship when children are looking more for a loving exchange relationship. So the teachings of Krishna consciousness in their early years was something that we left to others in the community. At home, naturally, we tried to provide a good example, and not like we avoided talking about Krishna, but being parents, being there for them, for all their needs as growing children, was what we focused on, and we gave them Krishna consciousness by association with others.
Yeah, that's another wonderful point that we do have these sanghas and these communities that Srila Prabhupada established, and it helps us to take the burden off ourselves. And it's, kids, they listen to others sometimes so much easier, so much better than they may listen to us continuously, because as moms, as dads, we have the responsibility for brush your teeth and get out of bed and eat healthy and eat your vegetables. And there's a long list of things. So it also becomes chant your rounds and listen to class. When you bring them in an environment of everyone doing it, it becomes almost just normal and natural, just a part of this is how we live, the lifestyle. So thank you. We have so many of you with us here today. Hare Krishna, Archana, Tiwari, Radhanath Dasi. So good to see you, Radhanath. Mataji, I see your question, and we'll hit it in a few minutes. We'll discuss it in a few minutes. Definitely, we will be answering that. So Sesha Prabhu, you had also shared with me, now this letter, you had shared with me a letter that you wrote about a Kshatriya, Krishna conscious Kshatriya training or Kshatriya education. And I found this to be very interesting, having been in education, actively teaching in education for about 24 years now. And I had always heard the quotes from Srila Prabhupada and our leaders speaking about how important it is to raise our children to become brahmanas. And I remember at a conference we went to about 10 years ago in Radhadesh, the quandary arose that it's not so practical that every single person in society, every child of ours will be okay to learn, the shlokas and the mantras and spend their life as pujaris or in the role of teaching, because we have, like Varnashram, we have so many different varnas that need to be addressed, so many different proclivities. And so this entire paper that you've written, this letter that you've written, hits on some important points about Kshatriya training. And first, I wanted to ask if you could share a little bit about, we'll go into this letter a little more. For you, what was your background that brought an interest in Kshatriya training in Krishna consciousness?
Well, the letter you're referring to is, I wrote in 1983 to the then Minister of Education, Jagadish Prabhu. And it focused on some of my experience in my own education as that relates to expanding education in ISKCON, in the Gurukuls. Jagadish was there in Vrindavan and had been there for some time, and the boys had grown to the age where different proclivities became prominent in their character. And so, as you said, pushing everyone down the Brahman path, especially once the proclivities have awakened, is not practical in terms of being an effective education tool. And so Jagadish was looking for alternatives, and he found out about my background of having attended the United States Military Academy at West Point. And he wrote me for my thoughts on how to introduce Kshatriya training or a military academy type of environment for those that had the proclivity for being in that order of the Varnashram, the Kshatriya order. So I wrote him some of my thoughts about the matter based on my own experience. Somehow or another, that letter has stuck around for, although it was a handwritten letter before the computers, the original handwritten copy somehow found its way back to me. And I kind of take that as Krishna's indication that, well, you wrote this so long ago, but now you have the responsibility for sort of pushing it forward. And so the letter talks about primarily character development, which is the centerpiece of what I conceptualize Kshatriya education to be, is character development. Of course, that's for Brahmins too, for Vaishyas, Sudras, everyone, character development, but particularly in a military atmosphere is what I wrote to Jagadish Prabhu about, based on my experience, my own military education at West Point.
Yes, so for those who don't know, West Point is a military academy where high school graduates attend to get their undergraduate or graduate degrees. You can get a degree at West Point, right?
Yes, bachelor's of science.
Yes, so like while most teenagers are entering college in America and they're immediately jumping right into self-expression and freedom and wake up at whatever time you want, go to bed at whatever time you want, and also do your studies. That's, generally the college experience these days, and perhaps also in the 60s, the late 60s when you were in college yourself, you had transitioned into West Point. And what were your days like, as a 19-year-old, as a 20-year-old at West Point?
Well, I think it could be summed up in one word: control. From waking early in the morning and going right to a military formation, to classes that were taught according to a specific method of the student doing most of the work, and military duties, including drill or parade and marching and other types of activities. That sort of was a hallmark of what we did. And I think if there are three words that can sum up the difference between my education in a military atmosphere and my friends who were in regular colleges, is that we had only three words we could say when any problem arose. No excuse, sir.
Wow. Amazing. I love that. I was raised in Mangalarti at age 3 and 4. At 3:45, we would wake up and go to Mangalarti every single day, probably for the first 12 years of my life. And so, of course, Mangalarti we didn't feel the control aspect because you connect with Krishna, you see Krishna's form in the morning, and it's so personal and so enjoyable to see the Lord in the morning. But it's interesting because somehow or other, as America and as Western civilization becomes more and more PC and liberal, as a mom, you think that an 18-year-old or a 20-year-old actually enjoying that kind of atmosphere would be, not so common. So it's wonderful to hear that you appreciated that atmosphere. And not only that, but there's so much more to it. There's here in your letter, you write, power and determination based on self-discipline are qualities which are used to achieve goals. And I really appreciated that sentence because you're focusing on this point of character development, which is self-discipline. And that stage of life, when a child hits the teenage years and beyond, they're really trying to figure out how to step away from what their parents' expectations are of them in disciplining and now motivating themselves, disciplining themselves. And so that felt like almost like the goal of this, that by the time our children go through, 12 years of an education with us in society, when they leave, they should have this ability to experience self-discipline. And
Yeah,
so I really appreciated that.
if anyone is going to accomplish any goal in their life, they have to have self-discipline, especially in a society that is more and more liberal. And I'm not commenting on whether that's good or bad, but I'm just commenting on how one, as an individual, has to navigate that situation. And self-discipline is key. We have to be able to establish goals and achieve them in life. And if you look at Srila Prabhupada's formation of ISKCON, he did it on a basis of qualities of work. He didn't have a lot of money or a lot of men or a lot of influence that he could call on to be successful. All he had to call on was the qualities of his character. And so he did that, and he was able to create ISKCON. I actually have some notes about how he did that I could share with you.
Yes.
Different dynamic factors he exhibited: determination, courage, stamina, the ability to undergo prolonged mental and physical duress. And we think about Srila Prabhupada, how he was alone for the first complete year when he was in the United States. How did he get the strength, the determination to go on through that period? There was nothing to encourage him. As a matter of fact, he was discouraged in letters he got from his godbrothers. But he remained determined and had a stamina, a drive, that's a personal trait that he had, that he used to help establish ISKCON. And so when we talk about Kshatriya training, obviously there's no army these graduates or people that go to this program are going to go into, but they will have develop their character and these qualities to such an extent they can achieve anything they put their minds to. It's interesting that in the Bhagavad Gita, the verse that describes Kshatriyas and it describes them in terms of qualities. The Kshatriyas and Brahmanas are described in terms of the qualities that they exhibit, whereas the Sudras and Vaishyas are, in the Bhagavad Gita, mentions specific types of work that they do. I think it's an interesting distinction. Brahmins and Kshatriyas work according to qualities. So character development is central to their education. And I found that through examination and based on my own experience, that this sort of a military atmosphere where people are challenged with accomplishing a certain amount, even if they're not given enough time, the whole exercise is, how are you going to manage your time? How are you going to maintain the determination to accomplish something? I think these are skills which are becoming scarce in society, and they are the qualities of great persons. So that's the whole idea of such an education in my mind, not to create a karate expert or something like that, but to create statesmen, great, noble people. If you examine Prabhupada's qualities that he started ISKCON, how he maintained ISKCON, how he perpetuated ISKCON, these are the qualities of a noble person. And that's what the idea behind the Kshatriya education that I've been working on is centered.
Shesha Prabhu, your words are filling me with like so much inspiration, motivation, like drive, just because we are navigating a new education world in America where there's so much push on the opposite side of, choice and ease of learning, and don't make them work too hard, and don't, there's so much pull on the opposite side now we're in 2020 now. And so hearing from you the importance, like the sheer importance of making sure that these qualities aren't lost in the education that we're giving, how Srila Prabhupada, he had this determination, this courage, and then you said stamina. And I love that specific example you gave. Give more work that they may challenge them, allow them to see what they can do better and better at every time, and challenge them. And that ability for a child or a teen to like reach more than they expected they could do is so powerful.
It's not for everybody now. It's not for everybody because they ultimately, young person, young man entering this program has to choose, young man or woman entering this program would have to choose, this is what I want. That'd be a big decision in their life because they're choosing to put themselves in a situation where they are going to be under certain type of pressures and expectations. And it's not for everybody. So choice is still important. Don't get me wrong, choice is still important. But for those that choose this, it's a way to develop their character in such a way that they can continue throughout their life making good choices.
So that's another valuable point. You're right, and that's what the beauty of our ISKCON schools is that they're small enough that you can take time for individual instruction and kind of gear your child accordingly to your students according to what their proclivities are, what their nature is, and just so many valuable points that you've placed here, that you've said here. And I'd love to do another show with you to develop and to detail this a little more. And I know you had said that you had more papers there right now, right? Kind of related to what we're speaking about. Ramanath Shuka Das has asked a question, and I think we'll answer your question, Prabhu, and then Radhanath Dasi, we're definitely coming to yours. Are there any discussions on the GBC level on how to establish a Varnashram college according to Srila Prabhupada's instructions? Kshatriyas need training in martial arts and heroism, Vaishyas need training in cow protection and organic farming, and Shudras need training in how to be obedient. It sounds very theoretical, but how to actually implement a Varnashram college seems to be a tremendous challenge.
Well, one thing that I can say is that this COVID situation has caused the GBC to look at how it's meeting because it can't physically meet. It's too dangerous. And so how are we going to meet? And so we've developed a new system of meeting online. But along with that, the executive committee has put to the members, okay, well, you can have a new format online, but is there a new priority of what you feel should be discussed? If we're revamping some part of the meeting, let's sort of revamp and look at everything we're doing. And one of the things that the members have responded that they want to focus on is this Varnashram Dharma. So maybe a silver lining out of the COVID situation, if there is one, I don't know. But focusing on Varnashram Dharma and seeing how the Varnashram College can be done, which Srila Prabhupada wanted, is something that's definitely on the mind of the GBC members.
Wonderful. That's inspiring, exciting to hear. And Ramanath Das, since you are clearly this is something you're interested in, I would say to get involved and work with those members who are already doing it and just start it. Just do it is what I would say. Is clearly this is something that you're very passionate about. We need devotees like you who are And I would say connect with the devotees that are doing it and just get it started. It just takes 2 or 3 members to get something started, and then Krishna brings the rest of the, materials or people or resources or money. Krishna starts bringing that in. So thank you so much for your question. And Radhanath Mataji, this is a big question for everyone, including me. And I'd love to hear your response on this. How do you encourage our children to chant? Parenting is so challenging during this decade in Africa. So I appreciate this session. Thank you.
Well, I think that group sessions are important to help children to chant. If they're alone or don't have someone there that's going through the same challenges they are, obviously it's going to be difficult. So I think in communities, this is where communities are important. You can join together and have japa sessions, especially for young children. And I think that one of the mistakes that was made in the past with chanting and ISKCON education is forcing or using chanting as a punishment methodology. So we need to steer clear of those, put the kids together, give an adult or two there as a model, to model proper chanting, and just expose the children to chanting as much as possible. And in that way, the spirit soul that's inside of every living being will respond to the chanting of Hare Krishna. And we have to have faith in that, and for ourselves and for our children.
That's such an important point as well. Radhanath Mataji, I hope you heard this, and I hope it addressed your question. Please do comment what your thoughts are to this response. Forcing our children to chant will produce contrary effects. They will grow to be adults who do not enjoy, who do not want to chant. And so bringing them in an environment where everyone is chanting together with them is so much more healthy, such a more healthy way to do this, to encourage their Krishna consciousness. Shesha Prabhu, we have about 5 minutes left. Also, for all of our viewers, thank you so much for joining. My name is Gopi Gita Shomakar. I'm here with Shesha Prabhu, who is the Minister of Education in ISKCON. And if you have any questions, we're ending our session now, coming to the end of our session. Please do go ahead and ask your questions if you have any. So this character, I wanted to, I just had a thought about this character, this Kshatriya training program that you're speaking of in this letter that you've shared. How do you see, like, visioning it out 20 years from now? What do you see as a way that this could become a reality? What would it look like in your mind?
Well, I think that that's a very challenging question. Because this letter that started our conversation was written in 1983, and we're in 2020. Much development since that time. But at least for me, I can only speak for myself. Of course, I wrote that when I was a young man. Now, when I look at it, I think, wow, how did I have the nerve to write such things? But I think for me, my contribution can be to try to flesh out more a curriculum. And I've done some work on this already, a curriculum. How do we achieve courage in battle, for instance, from the Bhagavad Gita verse about the Kshatriyas? How do we translate that into practical coursework and experience for children? Well, I think maybe some physical activity so that the student becomes comfortable with the body, and it develops in such a way that confidence comes from development of the body. How teamwork is necessary by working together with others. Maybe there's some kind of organized sports or other activities. And coupled with some physiological study about the nature of the body so that we're familiar with it. So what I'm trying to envision for you is how a curriculum of practical coursework and study can develop from the quality we're trying to create based on the Bhagavad Gita verse about Kshatriya's qualities. And so that kind of work, that kind of developmental work is something that I feel inspired to again take up in my life. It's come on and off for 30 years now, or maybe 40 years. But in the time I have left, I'd really like to do something in that regard. What others can do, maybe take some of that material and put it together in different ways, whether you start some small training, not even necessarily a big academy or something like that, but at least some small group of like-minded young people that can work together with young boys and girls that have the proclivity for this type of training. That's
I like it. You made it very practical, very tangible. It's not something that needs to be, we don't need to wait for 20 years for that. Developing a curriculum that focuses on these qualities and like actually ties together so that the essence of it is the quality. That's really nice. And you do in your letter talk about a few different aspects of it. You talk about physical endurance, academic and physical training, and academics centered around mathematics and engineering, which teach problem solving, history and politics, which relate previous experiences, and military training emphasizing etiquette, bearing, and appearance are at the core of the program. And this, it's so attractive, like for statesmen, you know, so for those who are going to literally be leaders of society, and they can use these qualities not just in the bhakti communities or the Krishna consciousness communities, but they can. Srila Prabhupada wanted our children to lead the world.
Yes, and Prabhupada said that these are special children. So the children that have been sent to this Krishna consciousness movement are already great souls. And so a Kshatriya training program, in my mind, gives them the opportunity to exhibit their greatness in society in general as great, noble people. And let people know the Hare Krishnas as great and noble people. And that can be led by those that have this kind of training and background.
Yes, and I'm going to reiterate what you're saying. The children who are sent to us are already great souls. Krishna says that, Arjuna says that, Srila Prabhupada says that, Lord Chaitanya says that. And so that's a great way for us to end here. We are here with the ISKCON GBC Strategic Planning Team. Please do go to ISKCON. It's gbcspt.com to see this video and a variety of other videos on important topics related to the world today. And my name is Gopi Gita Shomakar. I'm here with Shesha Prabhu. Shesha Prabhu, the Minister of Education, would you like to have any last words? Oh, sorry, I noticed Amar Bikram. Hare Krishna, he's saying how to cultivate children in our congregation. Prabhu, please send me a message, what city you're from, and we will contact you. We're right now in discussion with our Bhakti Children group of how to provide resources for every congregation member that's looking for cultivating their children. So please do send me a message on Facebook and we'll address your concern. So Sesha Prabhu, do you have any last words or instructions for parents today to share before we sign off?
Just one thing that my youngest daughter told me when I was speaking to her about coming on this program. She said, well, you always treated us with respect like we were persons, not like we were children. Mm. That's an important message to give all parents is treat your children as persons, respect them, listen to them, take in consideration their thoughts, and don't just pull rank on them as a parent, but give them a chance to be expressive. And I think that they'll respond in a very good way for you and for them as they develop in their lives.
Yes, wonderful. Respect your children as if they are human beings, as if they are persons, and don't just like shout instructions at them like they're animals, and respect them as if they were intelligent. It's so true. It's what my parents did as well. So I hope that helps a lot of you parents. Please remember these words and implement them. And we will see you next Sunday. We're back going to be live at this very same time. Thank you so much, Shesha Prabhu, for your time and for all of your decades of service for the children of our movement. You and your wife, Mother Madhumati, you've sacrificed a lot of your time for and me growing up as a child in this movement, and on behalf of all of the youth and children, I really appreciate your service, and I pray that we can support you more in your service. And please, Srila Prabhupada, thank you.
Thank you very much, Gopikita.
All right, Hare Krishna.
Listeners.